So this afternoon we are changing the windshield on a Gemini catamaran, and there are a few things that are very specific about the Gemini Cat, but 99% of the data and what we're going to go over today is applicable to any boat. So if you have port lights or windows, called port lights, but if you have port lights that run down either side of your boat, they've gotten cloudy, you can't buff them and wax them anymore, they're too thick, too thin, crazed, cracked, and any reason you want to change them, what we're going to do today is the normal basic stuff of changing pretty much any port light. This one is quite a bit larger than most. It is the windshield on this catamaran. But the techniques are the same, so we'll take you through it. We will mark a few things so that when we make the new one we have things marked. So we'll show you what you want to mark. We'll pull it off, clean the surface, prep for the new one, make the new one. So we'll show you how to use the old one to make the new one, and then reinstall it. There's a little bit of data on reinstalling that changes depending on what material you're using, so we'll go over that. And I'll try to make it fast enough so that we don't put you to sleep while you're watching the video. So grab a bowl of popcorn, get into a comfortable chair, and let's change some port lights. So on this particular port light, everyone remembers port lights are windows on a boat. On this particular one, we have some screws. A few of them are snaps for the canvas cover. We want to be able to reuse the canvas cover, so we're just going to mark so that we know where the snaps are versus the regular screws. So that's one of the quick things, and it'll be a quick chapter for you, but if you forget, it's really embarrassing. So a quick mention: if you have this, great. If you don't, fine. But for those of you that do, it's smart to mark it, because I promise you, no matter how much you think you'll remember it when you go to put it back together, you'll wish you had marked it. A lot of boats are built these days where the deck is built as one piece, the hull is built as another piece, and there's a flange on the hull. And they just sit on top of each other, and there's nothing in there except 5200, not even a bolt. Literally, they just squish the deck to the hull with 3M 5200 in there, which is, it's an adhesive caulk, but still you have to be confident in this stuff. A lot of boats are built with nothing but that. I'm old-fashioned, I like a bolt. As a matter of fact, I like a lot of bolts, but that's just me. I'm old, got gray hair to prove it. But anyway, so what we have here is the manufacturer of the boat felt that the screw was mostly cosmetic, and some of them went into the fiberglass, but not that much. But it's been 20 years, everything's been working just fine, so you can complain, but no one will listen to you. So the short version, that's just kind of background data so you understand what, in case you run into this, that, or the other on your boat. So now what we're going to do is pull this old one off, clean. We have to clean really well because there's some silicone in the caulk that they used. So if you remember any of our other videos, if there is any silicone left of any kind, nothing including new silicone will stick to it. So we're just going to start cutting into this thing. And one of the nice pieces of it being silicone is that it is very easy to cut. And you'll notice I'm cutting with just a regular old construction mud knife, and we are, which is one of the ways that we know that it's silicone. When you get into 3M 5200, things like that, you are not cutting it with an old mud knife. And we just wander along, cutting this stuff out. And then, once we've got a pretty good cutaway on it, it will pop up. And then the main clean happens after we have popped it loose. Now on this, there's a little piece of interior trim that has been glued to it. So try not to block you too much, but we gotta cut that loose or we'll destroy the interior trim and the owner's wife will kill us. That's bad. And before we started filming, I cut that other side, just so it'd be easier and you weren't bored senseless watching all of this. Now, we are mostly done. So, I'll leave it up to the director of the video if she wants you to be forced to watch everything, but just going to be more of the same, cutting this off. And then in our next little chapter, which should be smoothly flowing for you, we will have this off, so we just pull it off. And then we'll go back in and clean everything up. So see you in what for you will be a fraction of a second, and for us will be probably 15 minutes. All right, dude. Alright, so we have magically transported from the boat to my buddy's garage. It has mosquitoes. Oh, and they're trying to kill me. But that's a whole nother topic. They'll drain me like that. But anyway, so we have the original portlight windshield window that we pulled out. We cleaned this surface we cleaned this surface, but we left the protective plastic on, and we have now just laid this puppy, the old one, on top of the new one. The new one's going to be a little bit thicker and clear. We're going to add a little bit of strength to it. And all we do at this point is we're just going to mark where our edges are before we move it. This is one of those tips, 20 years working on boats, having screwed it up many times. One of the little tips, before you move it, no matter how cool you think you are, and I'm sure you're cooler than me, but no matter how cool you think you are, it is very difficult to reline things up. So I mark my edge that I'm going to cut, and then I take a battery drill and I just very lightly tap each one of the spots where I'm going to have a screw hole, and that way I'm absolutely certain that they're lined up. Then I come back, cut the edge that I've marked. So it's really easy, you just mark the edge. But I come back and cut that mark, and then I realign everything one more time, make sure everything is perfect, actually drill the holes the whole way through, and then fine tune that edge back to the original shape. And that's if you like the original shape. But it make sure that the holes are aligned and everything is good. Takes an extra couple minutes, 3-4 minutes, but it gives me confidence, because you only have to be off by a little to be off by a lot. So we won't bore the tears out of you making you watch everything, but we're just going to mark this edge, and it doesn't have to be pretty. You can see the corner over here, I've marked outside of it, and we don't care because it'll all be cut off. And you can go way past, it doesn't matter, as long as the edge that you're marking is good. And then we just keep running around this thing marking. It's heavy enough that it doesn't try to move. If you're doing something that's smaller and lighter, and it's not heavy enough where it might try to move when you're bumping it, you can tape it down. One of those old tricks that not everybody uses, but more people probably should. And you can never mark too much, as long as all the marks are in the same place. It never hurts to just keep marking. And my pen's kind of drying out, so I'm going to come back to it in a minute. But that's the gig, is you just mark all of this, then we'll tap it really lightly with the portable drill, and then we'll start cutting. And there'll be a few things to say when we get to the actual cutting part, because there are some tricks to make it not chip, but we'll get to that when we get to it.
What are you doing?
I am putting some blue tape on what will be the outside, so that when you're cutting, it doesn't have to be pretty, it just helps to cut down on chipping. My personal preference is a circular blade, but they were not available. So we are putting tape down so that when the blade goes junka 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 junka, highly technical terms out here in the real world boat repairs. Choka. But when we have the blade running, that it will be less likely to chip it. So that's what the taping was. And beautiful Whitey was smart enough to start recording when I didn't mention it. We marked our lines. We did our little touch drill spots just to mark them, not to drill the whole way through. And now we are sanding the edge, because no matter how perfect you are, no one's perfect. And so there's just little touches. Right here's a tiny little high spot. Right here's a tiny little high spot. And it's amazing how much of it will disappear when it comes time to install it, because it will disappear into the view of the overall boat. But we like perfection, even out here in the real world. And it's not that hard to get it most of the time. So we have our belt sander. If you have a belt sander, good for you. If you don't need one. You can use a nice orbiting disc. 6-inch I like better, but 5-inch will work. And you just go along the edge, take the little high spots down, make sure it's as straight as you can get it. And that's really all we're doing in this step. The next step, we're going to round these edges over, but you'll see that when you get to it. And of course, out here in the real world with our real world boat repairs, the boat owner had wonderful fat cigars, and so I'm partaking while I'm sanding away. But that's it. So this step is just knocking down the high spots. Alright, so we have straightened out our edges to where we feel pretty confident in them. We flipped it over, so what we were working on before was what will be on the inside of the boat. Because the blade cuts by pulling, we wanted the tape to be on the outside and the pull of the blade to pull from the outside. So we did everything technically upside down. And now we are headed into the next chapter of this adventure, so we are now working on the outside. It also has a film over the outside of it to protect it, and we always leave that on till the last possible minute. This is a plastic product and it scratches really easy, so we try to avoid the scratches as much as we can. We're leaving our blue tape on, which was our protector for when we're cutting, and our next activity only on the outside. On the inside, we're going to leave it sharp because it will give us more bonding area for our caulk. But on the outside, just to make it pretty and to let water sheet off of it, we're going to round that outside edge a little bit. We'll leave the tape on just because it's here and it won't hurt us. And next thing is to round that outside. So we're going to grab our tools for doing that, but you get a quick 30 or 45 seconds of listening to me yapping at you, so that you know what we're doing, because once I get into rounding, pardon me, it's kind of a zen moment where you can buy a router bit and it will route this perfectly, but we are out here in the real world and doing real world boat repairs and showing you how to get it done when you're in Tahiti or Tampa, Florida. And so we're going to use a orbiting disc sander to round that edge. And I won't be talking, I'll be in my zen moment rounding the edges. So I'm just letting you know what will be seconds away for you in the next scene, what I'm doing while I'm doing it. Alright, so on this little chapter in our video, we're rounding the edge like I already mentioned. The one thing that I wanted to mention to you is that I like to use 120 paper. 80 is a little too coarse, leaves scratches that they really don't go away. Higher than 120, it sands so slow that it's irritating. So I like to be at 120. If you have access to Home Depot and you can't get 120, 100 works just fine. And we're off to the races. So, one thing that I had to show you before I could talk about it is that you want to always have the sander moving, and you do not want to just run down making a sharp line. You want to be rolling the line. So you got to see a little of it before I started yapping at you so that it would make sense. And it gives you a beautifully rounded line. Sander's excited and wants to do more. But so it gives you a beautifully rounded line, and then this is where you fine-tune any other little imperfections or blemishes or anything like that from when you were cutting or belt sanding, because you will be looking down the line, so you'll be able to see it, round out anything that you didn't like, flatten anything that you didn't like, and bring it smooth. And that's all we're doing here. You just want to run your thumb down it. Make sure you didn't miss anything. Alright, so in that fraction of a second of video time, it's been about 20 minutes in Tampa, Florida time. And the power kind of comes and goes, but the camera keeps working. So we have rounded our edge, we've got everything set. We took our old piece and have set it on top, clamped it, because positioning now becomes very important, so it's clamped on either end. We use the cool plasticky things to protect everything, and now we are actually going to make our drill holes the whole way through. Now, no two port lights are exactly the same. On this one we have little snaps. So there's I marked when I pulled it apart. There's a snap here, a snap here, a snap here, etc. And so we are not going to countersink those. The rest of them were countersinking. But on these ones where the zippers were, or zippers my butt, these ones where the snaps were, we're not going to countersink, even though the last guys did. So we're just going to put a little mark so we know where the snaps are, so that we don't countersink where they're going. And then we're just going to run around and drill our holes. One little pointer, nobody thinks about it until it's messed up and then they have a problem. So I'll mention it here. When you're drilling, it's very important that you drill very straight. If you drill off at any kind of an angle, your screw won't want to go into the hole where there's already a hole. So you want to drill very straight, make sure you've got that thing and you drill straight down, and that's it. So you probably won't be able to hear me while I'm drilling, but I'm sure Videy will video some of it, but so I'm telling you what's happening. So we're just going to drill all of these holes. Once that's done, we will come back and do a quick countersink on the ones where they get a countersink. In this case, I'm going to put a slight, tiny little mark on each one of these spots where we don't want to countersink. so we remember where those are. And that's it. So in video time, another one of those fraction of a seconds, but in our time, probably 5 minutes away, I'll have the drill and the bit and everything set up, and we'll start drilling. But I wanted you to know what we're doing. Keep in mind, always drill perfectly straight. And if your port lights have snap attachments or anything else, this is where you remember to mark them so that you drill countersink or don't countersink accordingly. One other thing, just as a quick tidbit, some people don't like to countersink. And if your boat had the little, it's a washer, and the washer is countersunk, and the screw goes into that washer, all of that sits on top, then you don't countersink. So if your boat had that, or if you prefer to use that, you skip the countersinking part, because that piece of stainless trim is your countersink, and there are definite benefits to that. Costs a little bit more, sometimes you can't find them when you're out traveling the world, but if you can get those, me personally, I like them. It spreads the load of the screw out over the plexiglass or the Lexan. I happen to like them, but they do stick up a little bit, so it's a halfway planet. Nothing is perfect. If you gain half of this, you lose half of that. So I happen to like those, but on this boat we are countersinking because they were countersunk before, so we're staying with what we had. And that's it. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact Videy through the comment section, and she'll pass them on to me. I'll give you my best possible answer. So see you in a fraction of a second. So this was our mark on the old one, where we're not going to countersink. So we're just doing a quick mark right here, so that we know on our new one not to countersink.